Hello and welcome to today's video lesson, how to change your single-speed e-bike into a 7-speed hill climber. Another bicycle project with Mr. Bob. Hello and welcome back to another bike project with Mr. Bob. So today I'm going to be switching my single-speed cruiser bike into a 7-speed hill climber. Now this bike is from Electric Bike Company and it's the Model C class. I love this thing, I think it's awesome, but we really have some crazy hills around here and I really need that extra help to get up some of those steep ones. So I'm going to be walking you through the steps today and I hope you find it helpful and informative. First, we're going to take the hand grips off and we're going to take the brake off, and then we're going to add the shifter. We're going to run the wiring directly from the top. I'm not going to be taking lots of wires off and redoing everything or even switching the throttle to the left side, which you will see in other videos. I'm going to pretty much keep everything the way it is just to make this easier for you if you're going to do a conversion. And then part two, I'm going to be taking the wheel off, and below you're going to see a description of the Electric Bike Company showing you how to fix a flat. That's a very good video to learn how to take the wheel off and then install it back on. But I'll be doing that as well today, and then of course making some derailleur adjustments to make sure this thing runs smooth, shifts well, and works perfectly. So I hope you find this helpful, and let's get started. Okay, so we are now just removing the handles. We're using the Allen key set to help do that. We're going to loosen up the throttle as well as loosening up the handbrake. And there is the shift lever. Now I'm going to put the shift lever cable through that so it goes through to the other side. And then of course I want to install that. So at this point I'm going to pull off the throttle and brake handles and just slide that shift lever down the handlebars, and then of course you can reassemble the throttle and the brake handles. Now I think my goal here right now is just to temporarily put these on so I can set up the cables and route them. So we're just going to have you snug them a bit. Okay, so there's the metal grommet I'm going to stick onto the cable. And then we're going to place the metal wire cable inside. And we're going to route that and push that down through the other side where the shifter is. Now what we're going to do is get the metal cable and we're going to feed it through the wiring harness, as you can see in the picture. Now take your time with that because the metal cable goes first and then you have to work the rubber cable through the mesh sleeve that is holding or concealing all the wires. So as you can see to that picture up there, we have to push it through that little mesh. Now next thing is we're going to go down to this heat shrink and we're going to just cut a straight piece right off. We will be reinstalling this. Now as you'll notice here, I pushed it just a little bit too far, as you can see. So that little black cable, I'll pull it up a little bit and then I'll work it. This flexible cable is really easy to work with. Just take your time, don't force it. Didn't take me very long just to figure this out. Just be patient. This way you don't have to worry about removing cables and then reinstalling everything. Now we're going to get to the rubber grommet that's on the frame. And I think what I would do is take that off completely and then fish your metal cable through the rubber grommet and then down in the tube. In this case, you're going to see me going through the front of the square frame tube. That's where the basket would be mounted if you have a basket mount. So that's going to go right down there, real nice and smooth. And there I'm going to get the metal cable and stick it through that rubber grommet. Now, of course, it was easier for me to pull the rubber grommet out because what I ended up doing is getting some masking tape, put it on the end of that cable, so when I pushed it through it was easy to find. Now, let's go back and install that rubber heat shrink. And what I want to do is get some electrical tape and dress that up. I kind of like the way that fits. I like the look. So we're just going to keep that. Normally, if I had taken all the wires off, we could have redone all this, but it would have been an awful lot of work and really unnecessary. As a matter of fact, that group of wires you see there, when I'm done my project, I'm going to wrap all them as well to dress it up a little bit. Okay, it looks pretty good. As you can see, just like new. Okay, great. Now the shift cable has been pushed through the frame, and now I have to bring it back out right below the crank arm there. So I'm going to pull off that little cap, as you can see in the picture there. And I'm going to fish that cable down. Now, I did wrap a little piece of tape, like I mentioned, to the end of the cable, just to make it easier for me to reach inside with my needle nose and to pull that out and fish the shift lever cable through. One thing you want to pay attention to, that everything's not too tight or too sloppy loose. Next, we're going to grab the cable and put it through that grommet, and make sure you're putting it the right way, as you can see. And then once you go up underneath there and you push it through, then of course you'll be able to slide that back into place and assemble that rubber grommet back into the frame hole. Now the next thing we need to do is grab our little metal end cap for the shift lever, which is going to go onto the frame. So there's the cable, there's the metal cap, comes with the packet that you'll receive. You just push that metal cable through, and as you can see, it's on and mounted where it's supposed to be. Next, we'll flip the bike upside down to remove the tire, brake caliper, and chain. Now I like to raise the seat here just so I can make this a little bit more level. As you can see, I slowly lower the bike. Now I did put a big heavy-duty blanket down and then the white bed sheet on top, just so I had something more comfortable to stand on and a little bit more gentle on the bike. So we're going to take off the axle nut, and I'm going to use some masking tape to mark the brake caliper location, so when I reinstall them, they'll be going back in the exact same place. I'd prefer not to adjust the brake caliper if possible, and that's why I'm creating these little markers. So here I'm taking the bolts off, and I'm going to recommend that you put them in a bucket or just install them onto the caliper. Also, don't squeeze the caliper together. That means you have to readjust it when you mount it back on. Be very gingerly with that. I'm just using a little rubber band to hold it back so I can get some of the work done and before we reinstall. Now, time to rotate the bike. If you can't do it yourself, get somebody to help you. So let's take that cap off and slide that down. out of the way, and we're going to take the axle nut off. Going towards the bike. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Now I'm going to be using a rubber mallet, only a rubber mallet, and we're going to pop that axle up a little bit just to break that free. We don't want to hurt those threads. Next, what I need to do is I need to take the zip ties off the cable right there, because that cable, we need to detach that because that's going to the motor. That's the motor cable. Pay attention how it's installed so you can always reinstall it. Probably a good idea to take photos as you take your bike apart just to know where everything is, so when you put it back on you have a reference. In this case I was using a video. Now let's just pop that wheel off, no big deal. We're going to take the chain off. Okay, so now we're going to put the wheel off to the side to take that, get ready to take the sprocket off. Now, I used a milk cart, and of course we're taking the axle nut off and the torque washer. We're going to slide that off as well. And we're going to get ready to take the sprocket off. Now, you'll notice that the sprocket turns counterclockwise. And that's the way you're going to pop this thing off, counterclockwise. Now I'm going to be using a big old screwdriver, and you're going to see there's little teeth right there. It's very easy to put that in there. You don't need a tool. And your rubber mallet, a couple taps, you can see, just popped right up. No big deal. These are new bikes, so they're not on there that tight. Alright, so once we get that thing off, next thing I want to try to do is prepare cleaning and lubricating with some good bike grease at your local bike store. I also put the grease inside the cables because I think when you're mounting brake cables or brake lever cables, any type of cables, it's not a bad idea to put a little lubrication so when the cable's within the sleeve of the brake cable, it lasts longer and it's better lubricant. Just think that thing's popping up and down, especially brake cables. Alright, so now we're installing the new 7-speed sprocket. Just a FYI, you need to take everything off in order to fit that through. So I'm going to do the same exact thing as I did before. Reversing everything, routine, and we're going to put that sprocket on. Now it's going clockwise. So basically all I did is I spun that down and I hand tightened it up, and then there was like a little teeny, I'm using a punch tool just to snug that up a little bit. You can see the picture here. As you can see, the punch tool just sits right in there. Okay, we're back for part 2. Now I'm going to start breaking down the chain, removing the chain. Obviously with these 7-speed alterations, you need to get a new chain. You can go to your local bike store to buy a chain that's designed for a 7-speed bike. They seem to be all compatible, checked around, or you can just purchase a Shimano chain. Now the chain I got, it's one piece. It has an adapter that you can put on there, but you're still going to probably have to break the chain to get the correct length that you want. I'm going to have a description below on how to do many of these things, including breaking the chain and sizing the sprocket. I'll be doing that in today's lesson. Now, there's one thing I wanted to share with you. When I took the bike apart, I took the wheels off, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to do my own little custom work on the fender. On my bike, I use a little red pinstriping, and I really like that red look against this black frame. So what I did was, on both fenders, I took them off. It was really simple, and I put just a little line here on both sides. It just gives such a nice little accent. So if you want to do any custom stuff when your wheels are off, whether it's cleaning or adding pinstriping, this is probably a good time to do it. Let me give you a close-up so you can get a better idea of what that looks like. As you can see, it really does look good. I love that old classic look. Alright, so let's move on back to the chain breaker. You've got to take this single speed chain off. Like I said, you can buy another chain to match it up, create the proper length, and then you can break it and reassemble it. Now, as you can see, it's not that difficult. Again, in the description below, there is a link where you can learn how to take chains apart and resize them. Very simple. Okay, so we are good to go. Now, there's a couple things you need to pay attention to when you pull a chain apart. The links are different. So when you start adding links, make sure that you take that into account. Now it's time to install the wheel, and it's very important you get that wheel lined up into those dropouts. Now these torque washers, you can see, are inside the frame, and also pay attention to that little knot there goes down in the dropouts. So take your time with that. Sometimes you might need a little help pull that frame apart just a little bit. You should be good to go. So I'm just double checking to make sure it's good. Then what I do is hand tighten those lug nuts just to make sure they're on correctly. Now there's a real important thing that you need to pay attention to. As you put on those nuts and hand tighten them, you want to straighten out the wheel so it's not rubbing the frame. Another thing that I didn't mention as I'm tightening this up, just snugging it up to test, you have to make sure that the torque washers are in the opposite direction than where the wire or the cable comes out. You'll also see in that link below from Electric Bike Company when they changed the tire. So it looks like this thing's lined up real good. You can use an 18mm crescent wrench or this big old adjustable wrench. We're going to go down, and then we're going to go to the other side. We're going to go up. And we're only going to tighten a little bit at a time, and we're going to do both sides. And we're snugging. Now, they recommend using a torque wrench and torquing it down 30 Newton meters on the one nut. In this case, I'm just going to use a little common sense. We don't want the wheel falling off, but we don't want it so tight we can't get it off. So now we're going to be sliding the end cap up and make sure that's snug, make sure everything's smooth, the wheel's turning, to make sure that we can now install the derailleur. See this bolt on the back of the derailleur? That's what it gets mounted directly on the frame. As you can see, the strange way I'm holding that up, I'm kind of pulling that derailleur up, then using my Allen key to line up the hole and tighten it in there. Now it's time to snug it, make sure we're good to go, and it can move back and forth. I'm satisfied with this. Excellent. Moving right along. Now it's time to rotate the bike again and to install the brake caliper. Now remember that tape marker. I'm going to use that to line that back up. So we're going to take the little, no, like I said earlier, don't squeeze those brake calipers. It's a pain to readjust them. Now let's prepare to mount the caliper bolts. And screw them right in to the caliper itself. And that does move back and forth, so you do have some flexibilities you'll notice as you do the project. I use the tape. That means it's going back exactly where it was, and if I tighten up the wheel in the exact same space and everything was lined up, I shouldn't have to make any adjustment on the caliper. Again, see the description below from the electric bike company. Alright, so now the brake caliper is installed. Let's check to see if there's any rubbing. Perfect, no rubbing whatsoever. Good to go. Alright, now it's time to get the bike back upright. Make sure you take your time with that. Get a helper if you need to. These are heavy. And we're going to rotate the bike because we have to go back to the shift cable. We're not quite done installing that. First thing I'm going to do is get my little zip ties. Now you're going to see an area right underneath that front sprocket where you can put the zip ties through. There's 2 of them, so you want to make sure that that shift cable is locked and centered. Now you can do that when the bike was upside down. Probably easier, and you can see a little better. And we're going to get our wire cutters and nip that off. Excellent. Now we got to get to the second piece of the shift cable, and I'm going to file the ends because they come out of the box pretty sharp. Now I'm going to unwind my metal cable, and I'm going to actually lubricate that. That's what I was talking about before. Probably a good idea to always lubricate metal cable when it's inside the rubber casing. So we're going to get the silver grommets like we did the last time, and we're going to put one on the end, and you can see that's where that's going to go. And then of course I have to figure out how to cut that rubber cable to make sure it's the proper length. So take your time here. That derailleur moves back and forth, so that cable has to have some space. Get my nippers, cut the cable, and put the end caps on. Now we're going to push the metal shift cable through the casing. And then we're going to slide the metal cable down through the lock nut behind the derailleur. So you can see that looks pretty good, it's fitting pretty good, there's plenty of movement, nothing's impeding it. And then we'll attach the motor power by going underneath the frame mount like it was when we first assembled it. There you go, Bob. Need a little second there to do it right. Now remember, these have 2 little arrows, and they will line up just perfectly when you put those 2 plugs, the male and the female, together for the motor. Okay, now we're good to go. Now I built my own bike stand at the house. I'll make sure I'll put a picture at the end of the video. You can look at some of the pictures snapshots that I put together. As you can see, I'm putting the zip tie there because I want to make sure that that's snug, won't move around. And we're going to get our zip tie cutters out, and everything looks pretty clean and out of the way, just like it was. Alright, so now we have to get to installing the new chain. Now, like I mentioned, I bought a brand new chain, a KMC, and then I had to buy like 6 inches of extra chain because it wasn't long enough. So pay attention to that. Feel free to contact me if you have questions about any of that. Now take your time with this. Is a little bit of a pain in the butt getting that chain through. Now there's the links. Now this is a little tricky here, and you'll also see in the link below on how to adjust chain link. I think this chain's about 61.5 inches long, so Now that looks like the perfect spot where that needs to be cut. Then they say you have to add 2 links longer. So I'm going to make a mark there so I have an idea that's where I'm going to cut it. Now I'm not 100% sure I'm going to cut there because when I looked at the 2 chain pieces, they looked a little different. So I actually had to cut it 1 link longer to make it match. As you can see, I'm putting that out there. So take a good look at this. We want to make sure we do this correctly. So there's the chain breaker. I have to re-break this chain because, like I said, it looks like it was maybe a couple inches or an inch and a half too long once I added that 6-inch piece. So I have to break the new chain. I bought a K and C for 20 bucks. Okay. Now you can see where I'm trying to do this point here is notice how they're different. So we can't use them. So what we need to do is we need to make a little bit of an adjustment here. We're going to take the chain off there. And now we're going to add those links that come with your chain. I didn't want to repress on the chain. I want to have this piece. Now, before you do that, don't forget to run the chain through the derailleur. You do have an option of taking the pulley wheels off and doing it that way, but it'd probably be best to remember to run the chain through the derailleur, as you can see I'm doing. That's also a little bit of a pain, so take your time with that and watch the guides. You want to make sure the chain is within the guides. Now there's the guide I'm putting the chain through on the back end. A little tricky. And then I'm just going to be able to push that chain through the second guide. Excellent. There's one. First guide, the second guide. So it goes up and around and to the other way. Okay, we're doing good here. We are now ready to assemble the chain. Like we mentioned, when you buy these chains new, it's great to have these quick links for easy on and easy off for chain maintenance. So we will grab one of the quick links and put it on the inside. Grab the chain and grab the other side. So they're both at opposite ends, like a little puzzle piece. And then we'll slide that in there and make sure they're lined up. Most of the times you can do this by hand. Now see, that's what it looks like before it's locked in and tight. So once we pull that chain apart, it clicks in. That's what it looks like when it's locked in. Alright, now it's the assembly of the new shift lever. Put the brake handle back on, the throttle, and the handlebar grips. Now, what I am going to do next is put the bike on the bike stand that I built, and I'll share a picture with that at the end of the video. Kind of made that assembly there. As you can see, this is a heavy bike, so I put an extra strap. This is the part where we are going to be adjusting the derailleur. So I have fished the shift lever cable all the way through the bike, through the frame, through the derailleur. Now we need to get that chain all the way down to the smallest gear before I snug it up. Now I'm noticing here that when I have this down all the way down, it's not going to the 7th gear. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment now. See how loud and noisy it is? So I need to go to the high side adjustment. So I'm going to do one complete rotation counterclockwise in the high gear adjustment. And there we go. Now it's adjusted. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift it all the way up to 1st gear and check for the low gear. It's working perfect. So now it's being shifted up to 7. Everything's smooth. You don't hear clipping. I don't have to make any other adjustments. And of course we don't want to forget cutting the cable. So I cut mine about maybe 2 inches from the derailleur and put the little cap on there and crimped it this way that was out of the way. So no low gear adjustment needed. Perfect. Fantastic. Now it's in 1st gear. Alright, so that was a fun build. Of course, I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions and you want some help with your project, you can certainly reach out and contact me via my email or any of the links below, and I'd be glad to help and share with whatever I can. This video is just a step-by-step how to change your single-speed cruiser into a 7-speed hill climber. This particular bike from the Electric Bike Company in California, they have some great videos, and of course there's some great reviews about the bike. I love it. I think they're doing a great job. But any bike that can be converted, this video should help you. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. Ride your bike and have fun.